Check, check. Good evening. I think we're about ready to convene. I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the Placerville Planning Commission for Tuesday, October 16. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have the roll call, please.
Chair Friend.
Present.
Vice Chair Keeney.
Present.
Member Juba.
Present.
It is noted that member list is not present.
And we have lost Member Saragosa, who has gone on to the great pasture of City Council. Will we be able to do some sort of recognition of him posthumously?
Certainly.
We had to do
It's
something.
your direction.
I don't know how, at the normal, but
We
certainly
can invite
some,
him. Whether he comes, I don't know, but we can
okay,
certainly invite
some
him.
manner of recognition for his contribution. All right. The chair would entertain approval of the agenda, the consent calendar, which includes adoption of the agenda and adoption of the regular meeting minutes. However, the chair notes that I believe we're going to have to hold the adoption of the minutes until the next meeting, given there are only 2 members present tonight who are present at the meeting that the minutes are germane to. Mr. Keeney was not here for that meeting, so that would only give 2 commissioners the ability to approve.
Well, of the membership who was present at that meeting, you do have the majority of those
We have
present.
2 of 3, so I
Yeah.
guess we can go ahead. All right. Well, then the chair will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
If it helps the member who wasn't present, we could bifurcate the consent calendar as separate items where you could vote to approve the agenda and separate the minutes where the member could recuse herself for not being present.
Or abstain at the vote.
Or abstain, excuse me, abstain. Yeah.
Okay.
I meant to say that. Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. All right. At the suggestion of staff, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Okay. We all in favor with that? Aye.
Aye.
Good. Chair will entertain a motion to adopt the regular minutes of the meeting of September 4.
So moved.
The chair accepts that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain?
Thank you.
Great. That moves us along. Okay. No items pulled from the consent calendar. Items of interest to the public. Do we have any written communication?
Yes, the written communication is the resignation notification from
okay.
former member Saragosa.
Okay, and then any oral communications. This is an opportunity for any member of the public in attendance here this evening to address the commission on items that are not on our agenda. Be advised that we cannot take any action on any item that you bring for us, but we are certainly still interested in hearing of anything you may have to offer. Does anyone wish to address the commission on an item that's not on our agenda this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4, public hearings. The first public hearing is site plan review 1803. This is 2950 Bedford Avenue, a request for historic district review to alter the west elevation exterior of the First Church of Christ Scientist Building as follows. A demolition of existing concrete stairs, construction of a new accessible ramp and mobility pathway with metal railing, removal of one window to construct a new accessible door opening, and replace an existing exterior door. Improvements would serve the church sanctuary and Bible reading room. Ready for the staff report.
Okay, certainly. The request tonight was submitted by Carl Dingle of Carter Kelly on behalf of the property owner, which is the First Church of Christ Scientist. The address 2950 Bedford Avenue is located within what's called the Bedford Avenue Clay Street Historic Residential District. Indications are that the church was built in the early 1930s at the corner of Bedford Avenue and Union Street, where US 50 is today. In 1954, the church was moved to its present location so that construction of the highway could commence. In 57, a permit was issued by the city for a church addition. It appears that this addition that formed the building L, that's the shape of the building today, and is now used as the reading room. In 2001, the Planning Commission approved and permit issued for vinyl framed window replacements on both on both the church and the reading room. A disabled access ramp was also approved by the commission at that time for the Bedford Avenue church entrance, but was never built. The purpose and intent of tonight's request is to make the church and the reading room portions of the overall church property accessible for people with disabilities. To accomplish this intent, the request would make exterior alterations to the west side of the existing church, as well as the reading room entrance area, which is also located on the west side of the church. Proposed alterations would be visible from both Spring and Pleasant Streets. As mentioned in the agenda read by the chair, the applicant's submittal documents show the proposed scope of work, which would include, again, demolishing the existing the stairs serving the reading room, remove an existing church window and its lower sill, install in place of the window a new accessible door frame with metal raised panel door to serve the church, replace the existing reading room door with a metal raised panel door. Both new doors would match those on the Bedford Avenue church entrance, as well as construct new stairs, an accessible ramp, and a mobility pathway with metal railing to serve both the reading room and the new door opening to the church. New work would cause the removal of some existing landscape plants along the church exterior. Some of these plants, as noted in the applicant's submittal package, would be relocated on site to the area of the existing propane tank. City code regulations require that when exterior alterations to existing buildings that are located within the city's historic districts and the alterations are visible from the street, before a construction permit for the alterations can be issued by the city, the Planning Commission must approve the alterations. Staff's review of the request is that it is consistent with the general plan goal and policy calling for the enhancement of an historic and architecturally significant building. This request would enhance the church by accommodating access for the disabled. The request is also consistent with the city's historic criteria in that the improvements are compatible in appearance with existing materials and building architecture, and the request would not impact the site or the surrounding historic district. Also, the minor change proposed tonight to an existing building, these activities are exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act. Staff recommends the Commission take the actions 1 through 4 that is laid out on pages 4 and 5 of staff's report. That concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Andrew. Questions of staff by commissioners?
No questions.
Very good. At this time, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. We'll extend an invitation to the applicant to address the commission with any comments that they may wish to add before we deliberate. Is there anyone that wishes to address the commission on this item?
Chair Friend, it's my understanding that the applicant, Mr. Dingle, would not be available tonight, but I do understand that some members of the church are here in his stead. Who may or may not want to speak.
And they're not compelled, you're not compelled to speak? Is there anyone that wishes to speak in opposition to the proposed project? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to commission for discussion and possible action. The chair would note that this seems to be a relatively straightforward request, and I do note that the accommodation for people with disabilities is an important one. I guess, and I'll direct my question to staff since I've closed the public hearing. Do we have any idea if this is an ADA requirement or if this is simply something the church wanted to do?
It's my understanding from federal law that accessibility for the handicapped is not required for a church facility.
Okay. Okay, so the church has simply decided this is something that meets their needs, and they want to go ahead and do it.
It's my understanding from Mr. Dingle, who's not here this evening, that he expressed to me that I believe there is a parishioner or two who they have to physically lift from the Bedford Avenue stairs to get that individual into the church facility.
Sure, that makes sense. Okay. All right. Commissioners, any comments? Mr. Keeney?
I agree with your assessment. This seems very straightforward. I also think that I had a few questions for Mr. Dingle about his design, but it seems to blend in as well as it can with especially with the annex, which is more modern architecture. And I think they did a nice design to protect the gables above the windows, and also the window to the right of the gabled windows on the back of the church is where they're going to put in that second. There's going to be 2 doors put in, but I think they did minimal impact to the structure, and I think it also blends well with the design. The only question I was going to have was, actually one important question was if the concrete could be colored to match the exterior. It's not very much showing, but it might be something to help it blend in with the color scheme of the existing church itself.
Do you want it to match, or do you want it to contrast?
I was thinking to have it to match, since there's basically just 2 colors to the color scheme. But I don't think that's necessary. I just thought it would be a nice touch as far as matching finishes. And
I
things
only
like that.
ask that because I'm a contrast guy.
So
I personally would want contrast, but I have no opinion on it beyond that. But it's just to make it stand out.
But I think it's it's a needed improvement, and it's thoughtfully done.
Okay, Commissioner Zuba, anything?
Nothing for me. I'll keep my comments about contrast versus consistency to myself, so as not to disrupt the order of the commission.
All right. Well, in the absence of any strong feelings, particularly in opposition, the chair would be interested in a motion.
I move that we adopt. I want to adopt the staff report's conclusions 1 through 4. We have adopt the staff report and finding that it's exempt from CEQA. The finding that the modifications are consistent with the zoning ordinance and design review regulations, and approve the site plan review.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? I think given the relatively small size of our group, I'll just ask for all in favor of the motion as presented.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Just for the record, I believe the decision is appealable to the City Council should somebody feel that this was not a good decision by the Planning Commission, that it could go there within 10, is it 10 days, Andrew?
Yes, 10 calendar days.
10 calendar days. Good luck and thank you. All right, that brings us to item 4.2. This is 2628 Carica Court. This is a map amendment, 1801. We are requested to make recommendations to City Council on a request to amend the Quartz Mountain Subdivision Phase 1 map to expand the existing building envelope on Lot 9 in order to allow construction of a new single-family residence. Can I have the staff report, please?
Yes, tonight's request was submitted by Chris and Nancy Baxter. They are the property owners of Lot 9 in the Quartz Mountain Subdivision Phase 1. The address of the site is 2628 Carica Court, and the Baxter's request would indeed modify the building envelope for Lot 9, expanding the area of the envelope, located near the northeast corner and the southeast corner of the lot, where he has indicated it on the submittal materials. The intent of the building envelope expansion is to construct a single-family home on the lot closer to Carica Court on a portion of the property that is less steep in order to create fire-safe defensible space clearance for the home. Expansion of the building envelope for Lot 9 would also bring the building envelope in line with the neighboring properties on the same side of Carica Court. The intent of the building envelopes at the time of the subdivision map was recorded back in 1994 was to maintain native trees on many of the lots. The current building envelope for Lot 9 was was designed to protect specifically the ponderosa pines. The applicant's submittal materials indicate that 5 ponderosa pines were removed prior to the application submission. These trees were located, again, near the northeast and southeast corners of the lot. They were located outside the building envelope, but would have been located in the expanded building envelope had they not been removed. Staff has added a condition of tonight's approval, or excuse me, tonight's recommended approval. In order to mitigate for that tree removal, the condition of the project would require the property owner to plant and maintain 5 ponderosa pines for a minimum of 5 years, minimum 15-gallon size, within Lot 9, prior to a certificate of occupancy for the proposed new single-family residence. They may plant them outside the defensible space area around the proposed home, but must be within Lot 9. In the event there is unacceptable tree growth, unacceptable tree condition, or even tree death, then it shall be grounds for non-compliance of this condition. Also, should the property owner not obtain a certificate of occupancy for the proposed single-family home within 18 months of city approval of this map amendment, 18-01, the city will initiate the recordation on the property title of a notice of noncompliance for failure to mitigate for the removal of the 5 trees as indicated. Both City Code and the Subdivision Map Act authorize amendments to recorded parcel and subdivision maps by either recording a certificate of correction or filing an amended map. For tonight's map amendment 18-01 request, the applicant must file an amended subdivision map. The Planning Commission tonight is advisory to the City Council for this request. City Council has the authority to approve subdivision maps and, of course, amended subdivision maps. The Council must make specific findings to approve a map amendment. Required findings are provided for the map amendment on page 4 of staff's report. Staff's review of the request is that it qualifies for a categorical exemption from the California Environmental Quality Act per section 15305, in that it involves minor alterations to a land use limitation that does not result in the creation of a new parcel. Pages 3 and 4 contain environmental findings for the CEQA exemption. Staff recommends the Commission recommend to City Council that they, number 1, certify that the requested building envelope amendment, the map amendment to the Quartz Mountain subdivision for Lot 9 is exempt from CEQA, and also approve the map amendment 18-01 based on the findings prepared and subject to the conditions of approval provided in staff's report or as modified by the Planning Commission. Mr. Chairman, the applicant is in the audience this evening, Mr. Baxter, and that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Andrew. Questions of staff by commission? Commissioner Keeney?
Mr. Painter, I had a question about the mitigation trees. You say you're giving the property owner the leeway to plant them anywhere on the parcel outside of the, outside of the defensible space. Mm-hmm. How is the city going to monitor that? Do you have a form for that, or is it a self-reporting form? The property owner fills out a document and submits it annually. How do you verify that those trees are surviving?
Well, the first mechanism is that the applicant is going to need to secure construction permit, begin building the home, and then upon, before the city will issue a certificate of occupancy, that those trees must be planted. Upon, subsequent to that particular action or that event, then staff will need to monitor that. Whether we go out yearly, I don't know, but we will certainly put it in our calendars that they're going to have 5 years to ensure that the livability of those trees. If one or all are not living at that particular time in 5 years' time, then the city, under the current condition, could require them to be replanted, and an additional 5 years would be on record that the owner would have to comply to ensure that they're still alive.
Thank you. I didn't mean to burden staff further by going out and doing a site inspection. I think a self-reporting form and perhaps, a midpoint inspection or photographs or something like that would be
Oh, those are good
suitable.
suggestions. Thank you.
Just thinking on my past experience where mitigation trees, if they're not monitored, then, they may not survive, which goes counter to, the whole purpose of point number 4 there on page 5 of the staff report. And then this maintaining of the trees, we don't know, information in front of us, we don't know when the building permit will be pulled and construction finalized. If the property would happen to change hands, then does this obligation for the tree's survivability, would that runs with the property?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Commissioner Zub, any questions for staff?
A question about CAL FIRE defensible space. I'm not sure if this is within staff's purview. What is the recommended tree density per acre?
From a forestry perspective, typically you would want to plant the ponderosa pines no closer than 10 feet of each other or to an adjoining tree.
Were you intending your question to be the density on the lot or the density in a close proximity as explained by Director Rebus?
I would say density per acre.
Per acre.
I'm curious if you take down 5 pondos and then plant 5 more somewhere else, does that really get you any further ahead in terms of fire safety?
Well, I think the intent of the applicant, and he can speak for himself shortly, but I believe the intent was to provide the defensible space around the immediate home that he proposes to build. I would think there would still be remaining land on his little over 1/2 acre parcel to accommodate the additional 5 trees that staff is looking at, or as modified by the commission and or council.
And just an additional comment, if I may, I think what was actually necessitating the need to actually remove these trees was the applicant's intention of modifying the building envelope, and so actually a driveway and possibly part of the home would encroach too closely to the trees. But I do want to add that typically defensible space, if you read the documentation in the staff report submitted by CAL FIRE, typically within that 30-foot zone from the house, you would limb up mature trees. You didn't need to take them out, but they would be limbed up. You want to prevent a ladder fire, so you would space any understory or shrubbery so that there's a distance between the height of the top height of the shrub and any of the lower hanging branches. And then you go off from there. You can go 100 feet. And again, I think it's more or less to prevent a ladder fire, so that fire would burn up shrubbery below and then work its way up into the crown of the tree.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have maybe a little more experience since I had come from a background arboriculture and fire ecology, but it's not so much the density, as you point out. I mean, that's one consideration, but it is proximity to a structure. And the clearing of the shrubbery, the low-growing material is also critical to fire safety. It's not just removing large trees. Ponderosa pines, our native trees, tend to have a big, fuel load, but there's the matter of getting the low-growing things. That's where you have the potential to ladder up, and as Pierre pointed out, you can avoid that. You can minimize that by limbing up, or it's called raising the canopy on the trees, and also keeping them from overhanging your structure. So there are a lot of different strategies that are available to property owners. I don't know if that helps answer your question or not.
It does, yes. I'm by no means a fire expert, so I appreciate the clarifications.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think what was stated is exactly correct. I think you're looking more of fuel management, so that you manage, should a fire be approaching the house, to prevent it from spreading from the different fuels and preventing the ladder fire. As far as density, that's more of a forestry management practice, so that you don't have trees overcrowding each other, and so it allows them to room to grow and maximize their size. So that's where I came up with I didn't come up with it, but that's usually the closest you would want to plant trees would be 10 feet of each other and no closer than that. Typically you want maybe 15 feet to maximize from a timber management point of view.
Are you acquainted with Roger the Shrubber?
I am not.
All right.
Let's
That's
make
an
that
oblique
introduction after the
oblique
meeting.
reference. The chair is somewhat confused, and at the moment is not comfortable with what all this other discussion aside, and we haven't opened up for public hearing yet. First, can you explain the difference between the applicant and the owner to me? As referenced in the staff report on page 3 of 5, we have applicant Chris Baxter, who I understand is in the audience this evening, and then we have the owner.
They are, the husband and wife own the property, so.
So can you explain the sentence,
Chris and
applicant
Nancy
Chris
Baxter.
Baxter informed staff that under the owner's direction? I'm not interpreting that the wife told the husband to cut the trees down. Is there some other relationship that it sounds like these are two different,
They're one and the same.
okay.
The owners are Chris and Nancy
Okay,
Baxter.
all right, so now I'm going to go on to, from what I understand about the building envelope, and it's unusual for me to have this engagement with staff before I've had the public hearing, but I really want to understand this before I go into the public hearing. The building envelope, and as it says in the staff report, are designed to preserve assets of high biological value, in this case, mature ponderosa trees. And then what I heard the director say was, the owner decided to cut the trees down so he could modify the envelope. And if that's true, I don't know what I'm misunderstanding, but I'm troubled by that. And in some respect, it reminds me, oh my God, I hate to bring it up, something about an In-N-Out burger, and I'm not going to say anything else beyond that. But it's like, okay, well, you bought the property with these conditions, this restriction, and then a decision is made, well, I really don't like those restrictions because they prohibit me from doing what I want to do, so I'm simply going to remove those barriers that are that impediment, which unfortunately was protected by the building envelope. I need you to explain why I am incorrect in my understanding of what happened and what's going on.
You are not. Those are both true statements.
Okay, so then let me ask a let me just
Rhetorical
take
question.
this out a little bit, and this is not directed at the applicant in any way, but doesn't this greatly diminish the whole purpose of establishing a building envelope in the first place? If somebody can simply then go and alter or remove what was supposedly protected, and it's like no big deal, we're just going to make a recommendation to city council, it all fits, it's all good. In the finding, it says on Roman numeral 2, page 4 or 5 of the staff report, suggested basis for making each of these findings to approve the regard set forth below. There are changes in circumstance that make the size and or location of the building envelope as shown on the recorded map no longer appropriate or necessary. Well, if you remove the biological assets that were supposedly protected in the first place, then that's true. But I'm really struggling with this. And again, I want to know what I'm missing, because I'm not sensing anything from staff that something kind of not so good happened here. So help me. I won't go on. I don't understand.
Thank you, Chair Friend. You are correct in that when at the time that the environmental assessment was done on the proposed subdivision, the tree canopy was considered a valuable asset, and so as part of the subdivision map, the city imposed development envelopes in order to basically state on a parcel by parcel basis, this is where you can place the house, so as to preserve the mature ponderosa pines. And so in this case, we had been working with the property owner for a number of years on this, off and on. And so we were unaware until more recently that those trees have actually been removed. So staff decided to fashion this application in a manner that, okay, had the trees not been removed, what would staff had recommended? We would have still been here recommending to the Planning Commission that those trees could be removed, and then the removal of those trees would be mitigated by replanting them on another location on the site, as the condition reads, for making sure that the trees survive by ensuring year after year for up to 5 years that they're then viable and they've established themselves. So with that said, the trees have been removed, and so it's not to say that the Planning Commission could impose maybe some additional mitigation measures. Maybe you want a 2-to-1 ratio. I haven't actually visited the site. Mr. Painter has. Maybe he's looked at the property, and there's ample room for additional ponderosa pines to sort of enhance the number of ponderosa pines, at least providing for the minimum 10 feet distance and that sort of thing. But for the most part, I think an explanation by the owner is probably due to the Planning Commission
Right,
as to
and I'm
why
kind of setting the owner up for at least
No,
where
but I
this
mean,
commissioner is, and but I
staff
wanna
can't
have-
speak on for the owner
Correct.
as to what was his thinking process to remove the trees when we had been in conversation probably for a number of years on his desire to modify the envelope. And staff didn't have a big issue with that because it seemed to make sense. Maybe it'll be a lot less grading. The driveway will be
in
shorter.
those discussions, was there ever the suggestion by staff or the concept by staff that those trees could be possibly removed, and then that removal mitigated? Was that ever raised at all, even just kind of in quasi-passing?
No, because those trees were protected by the fact that there was a building envelope on the parcel to protect the trees.
So the right way for this to have happened, if I understand what you just explained to me, the best way would have been for the applicant owner to have come to you and said, okay, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to remove these trees. I want to change the envelope by removing these trees, and then we'll plant 5 or 10 over here, okay, which is
Correct.
kind of what, that's what should have happened, okay?
Yes.
And I'm all good with that.
It still would require going to city council to get the parcel map approved.
So what I'm fundamentally bothered by, if you understand what I'm really bothered by, is, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. It's always easier to beg forgiveness than ask permission, right? That's a saying, and so it really. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear as to what happened and what the requirements were. I want to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding anything before we allow the applicant to kind of talk to us. But I mean, it's of merit to me that you've been in discussion with the applicant on this topic for a number of years. It's curious to me that the thought of removing the trees and replacing somewhere else didn't come up. And then it's bothersome to me that the trees were simply removed just to get the impediment out of the way. And that's kind of where I'm at right now at the moment.
You are clear on the facts,
Okay.
Chair Friend.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead with that. Yes, Commissioner, I'm sorry.
I have one follow-up to that, and it relates to an area of the parcel that might be a good candidate for the 5 additional trees. There's a graphic behind you on the wall. It's the small one above the photos, rather gray or bluish tinged copy. It is actually a portion of the recorded subdivision map. Now, it's partly obscured by the applicant's notation in red where the building envelope is, but you could see a color gradation difference to the west side of the parcel. And you can also see it on the eastern and northern portions of the other parcels at the end of that cul-de-sac. That's open space land that was set up during the whole subdivision process. where no construction could occur within that. So that would be a location outside the building envelope, but clearly in an area which the city envisioned it to be in an open space area for not only vegetation, but wildlife, et cetera.
Okay. So those of you who know me know that I'm a huge private property individual, so that's kind of where my philosophy lies. Let me ask this question, because I thought I heard a possible allusion to this. Is it staff's position that the approach that the owner is taking, regardless of how we got here, but the approach that the owner is taking at this point, you could argue it's beneficial in terms of less disturbance of the land to build the home? I heard you said something about less grading.
Yes.
And would staff affirm that this is actually a superior approach, and we can mitigate the loss of trees by planting more trees, and at the end of the day, this works out a little bit better, and that envelopes, they'd all, one size doesn't necessarily fit all. Is that safe to say?
I think an argument that Mr. Baxter is going to raise tonight, and it's echoed in his written material that he submitted, is that in this case, the southeastern corner of the site,
Right.
as evidenced by the larger map, which depicts where he wants to build the home,
Correct.
where with the modified envelope. The contours of that portion of the lot are less steep, and that is one of the purposes of him wanting the home closest to that. And also, he would get the benefit of the defensible space of the cul-de-sac. Let's just be blatantly obvious here.
Sure.
That's an impervious surface that's not going to, well, it shouldn't burn. That's about all I have to say with that. I think he really, the property generally slopes in this particular fashion in a northwesterly direction.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to assuage my concern over how we're at this particular point in time. Okay. If no other questions of staff, yes, sir.
One more
Commissioner
question.
Zuba.
I'm presuming there's no rule against removing those trees. The applicant didn't run afoul of any of our codes by taking those trees out, even with the envelope as it is today.
This particular subdivision has CCNRs in them, and my understanding, having read those documents to some extent, there are provisions for property owners within that subdivision to do their own self-policing. But as Director Rivas mentioned, these were set aside as protected due to the envelope shape. As you'll notice, they have those arcs which really depict where the trees were going to grow. So they were protected by being placed not within the envelope but outside. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
My question is, even though these trees were outside the envelope,
Yes.
there's nothing preventing you from cutting them down. Is that correct? There's no. I mean, maybe there's something in CCNRs.
Is there a permitting process? Is there a permission requirement?
Well, if I can attempt to answer that, basically that was a mitigation for the subdivision to begin with. Those envelopes were set up to preserve the trees, so a property owner doesn't have the ability to come in and chop them down. We're now violating the mitigation measures for the subdivision.
Okay.
It's a CEQA violation.
All right, it's a CEQA violation. So, and I don't want to go too far down this particular rat hole, but I am intrigued by the question. What are the consequences then? Right? Are you getting to consequences, Commissioner Zuba? I mean, are there consequences of this?
Yeah,
besides the fact that
consequence-
it's just a shame.
Staff could have placed a notice of non-compliance on the property, recorded it against the property to give notice to any subsequent owner, purchaser of the property that the unauthorized removal of these trees occurred, and that new owner, say they sell the property, decide not to build a home, somebody else buys it, then the new owner would be required. It would ensure that the buyer understands that they purchased the property with the requirement to replant the trees that were taken out.
Okay, so the consequences are, you're certainly up for the restoration. All right, are we up for the opening of the public hearing? I'm going to open the public hearing. I'm going to invite the applicant, owner, one or multiple individuals to come and address the commission on this. And I'm going to, I had something I wanted to say in advance, but I can't remember what it is. It may come back to me. So is this Mr. Baxter?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for addressing the commission on this.
Okay, I bought the place, 12, 13 years ago. I always envisioned this is a nice lot. I bought it at auction from Sherry Rafferty, one of her auctions. I said, this is great. It's got a great view going down this canyon. I still think it's a great view. It's as nice a lot as one of the nicest lots around. I also have always dreaded the view of something coming up that canyon, namely something that's really hot, burning and smoking. And I know we've gone through this for a while, but at some point I got the impression that if I moved the house back, the plan that I already have, I have the plan, and if I move it back, I can fit it into that envelope. It just barely fits in where those trees would have been. That's where the mitigation thing came up. Well, if you move it back there, then you can move those trees, but you can't change the envelope. Well, that's fine. And then I said, well, why keep the trees in? It became to me the trees were not the issue. I think the trees aren't the issue. I don't think they really ever have been, especially if I can mitigate them. I'm not crazy about mitigating them with pine trees. I think there are other things that aren't carrying so much resin, so much burnable things in them. I've done some research on that. I mean, some maple or poplar or cherry trees or something like that are high moisture. It's not like you cut down an oak tree. These pine trees are just, they're like matchsticks. And so I said, okay, well, if I build it back there, then I could chop these down. So I chopped them down. And then I said, well, okay, now it's going to cost a small fortune to build this thing back in here. It doesn't allay my fears of something coming up that canyon. It doesn't jive with the intent of the CC&Rs, notwithstanding the pine issue, because the CC&Rs scream for uniformity. They want that house up to the road if they could have had it there, just like the rest of them. It's a neighborhood. It's not a forest. This is a neighborhood. There are three houses in there with no trees around them, or barely any, and it works. It's a nice neighborhood, and it's going to be building again. The trees next to mine are just, the lot next to mine is just a forest. I'd like to see them clear that out too, if they could, except for one big oak tree, which carries a whole lot more water in it, moisture so I was under the impression I could chop these trees down. And then I said, well, hell, if I chop these down, the trees were never really so much of an issue if I can mitigate them. So now I'll just move the plant right back where I had it originally, because what's the use of the envelope if the trees are gone? So for me, it was kind of a catch-22. And I'm okay. I told Andrew, I said, yeah, I'm okay with the trees, mitigating and putting some more trees up. I really have a little problem with the pine trees, though, because for all the research I've done, plus my insurance experts that are, talking at one ear and saying, this is not a way to stop a fire. And I've been on 20 fires. Working them over the years. I've done a lot of fires where, we're feeding people and the flames are just, it's crazy. I never envisioned that kind of a situation coming up my canyon, okay? To me, best thing about this whole thing, the fact that those trees are gone. And I don't see anybody that's going to convince me otherwise, preservation or not. The trees are were a problem for skipping up, like no matter how you trim them, they're still going to skip up there because of the lot next to it, and it's just going to keep moving up. Additionally, one of these things was a doubler, and part of it was just ready to go. I can't see putting my house anywhere near them. I can't see putting a house anywhere near those 5 trees I took out. I'd like to take another couple out even beyond, but I don't know they're on my property. That's the way I feel about it. And I think that to mitigate it with more pine trees, I think would just be, I don't think that's the greatest idea. I think there's some other ones that could really bring some safety up coming up that canyon, not just for me, but the 3 neighbors right next to me.
I remembered what I wanted to say before you came to the podium, and that was I absolutely respect an owner wanting to do with their property what they want to do. Okay, so I come from that particular perspective.
I think there are other neighborhoods at least where you could cut down 10 pine trees without facing any consequence at all. These, I know, were in here from these, and a lot of it had to do with the city coordinating with the people who drew up the CCRs, which I think is probably 3 owners ago by now. I don't know how many people have owned those lots or passed hands, but at that time, I also think that the fires were not nearly the hazard they are now. Just from evidence of the fires we've had close, or just the blackout we had 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. Fire's a real problem, and that could be a tinderbox right there coming at the canyon. Nothing to stop it, except defensible space.
Okay, anything else?
That should cover it, I think.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Questions of the applicant by commissioners? Commissioner Keeney, a question or comment?
Mr. Baxter,
Yes.
when you knew the limitations on the parcel, you saw the parcel map before you purchased the parcel. You knew that there was a building envelope that was created to protect trees of high value. You knew that, did you not, before you purchased the parcel? You looked at the parcel
Maybe
map?
I should have known it, but I looked at the parcel map, and I bid on several of those lots before I settled on this one, including the one next door. The auction went fast.
But you knew what you were buying when you bought the parcel?
I knew I was buying a lot that I wanted, yeah.
Okay, and so you knew that those trees existed when you purchased the parcel, you knew what you were buying?
Yes, I don't think I ever really comprehended what those little dots going around those arches were. I told Andrew, I said, this is easy, just here's an eraser, you know.
So rather than cutting down the trees, what I'm getting at is rather than cutting down the trees, why didn't you just sell the parcel or buy another parcel that more suited your needs?
I want this parcel. It's groovy. I mean, it's a good
But you wanted this
parcel.
parcel and you knew it had the limitations. I mean, the limitations are, if you will, part and parcel of the purchase.
Yeah, I thought, okay, this is easily fixable. That's what I thought, for sure.
Well, I disagree with your concept of what's defensible space, and I truly believe that you could have positioned a house on a half-acre lot, and maybe you would have come before this body or in front of staff to perhaps remove one tree or, work around it, and I think you could have found a solution. That's my opinion, but anyway, the trees are down, and what I'd like to go through is some of the things in your application. This conversation seems to be very focused on fire safety as opposed to habitat values and aesthetic values of trees. We can discuss that later. But you submitted this risk meter online report from CoreLogic.
Yes,
That's part. And when did you run this online report? Was that before or after you cut down the trees?
before.
Before you. And did you run it after you cut down the trees to see if you got a better number for your risk score?
No.
Okay.
Did not. Did it one time.
My problem with, well, we can discuss this as a commission, but my problem with your concept of defensible space versus what I've seen in my experience, both as an arborist, a resident of El Dorado County, and talking to fire ecologists, we differ. And one of the things I wanted to highlight was in the CAL FIRE document that you supplied as part of your application. Let me flip to where that is. You've made, you've emphasized how you feel that the ponderosa pines were a source of fuel. But on page 2 of the guidelines from CAL FIRE, I just wanted to point out that CAL FIRE talks about creation of defensible space through vegetation management and reducing the fuel load. And defensible space can be created removing dead vegetation, separating fuels, and pruning lower limbs of trees. And in the next bullet point on that page, it concludes that fuel reduction does not mean cutting down all trees and shrubs or creating a bare ring of earth across the property. And I just want to bring this to your attention because this is where I have a problem with your application. I don't think that, despite your experience working on fires, I'm not sure that you read this thoroughly and really applied it as best you could to the property that we're discussing tonight. So that's, I just want you to know what my perspective is on that. I understand, the trees are down. There's no bringing them back. And I, also want to point out that planting 5 15-gallon trees in no way, it's very minimal compensation for the habitat loss that we have on this parcel now. You had mature trees that were providing habitat, also providing shade to your parcel, and also, they have an aesthetic value. You may not agree with the aesthetics, but they do have a value, and that's all gone now. You've transformed that, and as Commissioner Friend pointed out, you're coming to us, asking, instead of permission, asking forgiveness, and so I have, I still have some problems with this application, given that information.
I understand the concept of forgiveness as opposed to permission.
Okay, I don't have any other questions for the applicant.
Commissioner Zuba.
Yes. Were you under the impression, or did anybody tell you that you could cut down the trees without a permit or any kind of modification?
I was under that impression, yeah.
Just of your own accord, or did somebody tell you that?
It came from the office, and I was informed that, okay, if you move your plan back away from these trees, then you could build right here, and then the trees be gone, and you won't have to change the envelope. That was the impression I got. Whether it's correct or not, I'm not looking to throw anybody under the bus here. It doesn't really matter. But I honestly got the impression that this is okay to do. I wouldn't have done it. Well, what are you going to do? You can't. I don't think it's possible to build on that lot the way those trees were. I just don't think it was to be safe.
Just so you understand, at least for me, the real issue here, and every time, again, for me, we make a decision on something, we grant a variance or allow somebody to do something differently, it's not necessarily for the item that's right in front of us, it's for the next item that comes down the road, right? So when I make a decision, I want to be able to defend that decision, not just for what I'm dealing with at the moment, but what might come in the future. And I'm really kind of grappling with this. I'm very sympathetic to the position that you find yourself in. And staff said, it's absolutely true, staff said, if the owner had come to us and said, okay, what I'd like to do is I'm going to cut down those trees and I'll replace them over here, and staff said they would have been okay with that, which suggests to me that it's a harmless act, okay, and to that extent I think that's true. Where the harm is for me is the and I'm not saying that you simply ignored it and said envelope be damned. I don't think that happened, but I think the requirement was simply set aside as an impediment, and I'm just going to go this direction. So it's a very difficult position for me personally to be in, because I want to respect the right of the property owner to do with their property. But as Commissioner Keeney pointed out, you bought into a property that had some level of restriction on it, and that's really is on the buyer. So I'm not exactly sure yet where I'm going to go with this. I'm very appreciative of your suggestion about replacing it, not necessarily with those particular species of tree, which you're correct in saying generally have high pitch loads and burn well. I went up and cut a bunch in the forest on Sunday and enjoying them already in my fireplace, and I do like how they burn, and there may be some others that we can replace them with, but I want something that's going to be native, relatively native. So we'll probably have that discussion afterwards. So I don't want you to think that we're just indiscriminately beating up on you for cutting down the trees. It presents a real challenge, frankly, for how this has unfolded. And I won't speak for the other commissioners, but I want to make sure that we handle it, we resolve it correctly. That's where I'm at. So
When I got that impression, right or wrong, it became it was a beacon. So okay, I can do this. It came with the mitigation circumstances. It came right there, whether it's pines or whatever. I would prefer not the pines, but I would prefer something that will stop something coming up that canyon. And it's viable. I mean, something coming up that canyon is a real possibility.
sure, without question.
The pines you cut, I mean, the wood you just cut for your fire with those pines, that's what people seem to want to do. They want to cut the pines. Pines are a problem. To me, they're a problem. And I still think the best thing they did to my property was cut those pines down. That's my feeling.
Okay.
I'd just like to also second what
Not
Commissioner
just
Friend
to
said.
make it an easier build, but to stop something coming up there.
And
I
I
also
believe you're sincere with that.
Would, I agree with, we want to respect property owners' rights, and so I just was very, I took a lot of time deliberating over your application. I was very confused about why things happened in the order that they did. So that's really what I've been dealing with as I've reviewed your application over the past couple of weeks. I did a site visit and those kinds of things. I'm trying to figure out, what the best approach, what the best solution is here. And as Commissioner Friend mentioned, we're setting precedent, and so this is difficult. Planning is we do have to respect property owners' rights, but we're planning for the future. We're planning for our community, and so if part of the mitigation for the subdivision itself was to protect trees, and then we go and cut down the trees, we undo that mitigation, then we've lost. Oh my goodness, 1994 is that when that was set aside?
Mm-hmm.
We lose a generation right there. Replanting the trees, it's going to be 50 years before we start to get the habitat value, the other benefits from whatever tree, be it a ponderosa pine or another tree. It's going to be human generations, a couple generations before we start to really recover from the damage that was done to this property. So those are the setting the precedent, seeing how we can mitigate and improve our environment, our community. Those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to fit your application, your proposal in, as we discuss it tonight.
If I might say one more thing, it was not my intent to throw this thing into turmoil, believe me. It was, I cut the trees down. I wanted to replace them with something. I don't want to throw up something that's not going to look good or be environmentally aesthetic. The house itself I had planned was going to be great. It's going to add to the neighborhood. That's going to add to some of the aesthetics also of the neighborhood. It's a nice looking house right on that lot. But trees are gone now.
Right.
They're gone.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yes, the staff report says that staff verified the tree removal via a site visit.
I'm sorry?
The report here says that the staff verified the tree removal at a site visit.
As,
They came out and looked at it and saw the trees were cut down.
okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything that came out of that? I mean, did anybody tell you, you shouldn't have done that, or that's against the rules? Anything of that nature?
Again, it sort of came with, okay, well, if you build here, it's okay. but I couldn't build there. I had a couple of people out there, and it was just, it's just, from my standpoint, it was totally cost ineffective. It just couldn't be done effectively, and it's always been screaming to me on the CCNRs, which I've looked at lots of times, that they want uniformity in that neighborhood. I guess that doesn't really jive with the city's drawing that envelope around those trees, and I understand that. So if I screwed up, I screwed up. But I thought sincerely I could take those down now and build it back here a little bit, but then it became impossible to build back there, and I said, well, okay, now the trees are gone. That's what I was thinking of it, and I still thought that those trees weren't the most important issue. The issue is, and I still don't, I still think that those trees being gone is a more important issue, just for the safety of the neighborhood, the town, as a fire break.
Okay. Any other questions?
I believe, Andrew, you raising your hand? You have a comment on that?
Yes, I just wanted to make a statement for the record. In discussions with the applicant, they mentioned at the applicant's application submittal that they had removed the trees, and I can't seem to find it in the applicant's submittal package, but I believe they do address the removal of the trees in the submittal. So to verify that's why, and staff makes it a common practice when an application is submitted, we go to the site. We don't just rely on the graphics and the submittal information. So I just wanted that we were responding to what we were told and what's written in here to verify that, yes, the trees were removed. And to really determine quantity of trees. Right. Maybe there were others that weren't mentioned, but were removed. Right. And I did see some other trees that were removed, but they appeared to be on a neighbor's property that were felled onto the Baxter piece. That's what appeared to me. But the ones in question, the 5, truly were on the ground when I visited the site.
Okay. And I assume you're going to have those removed or bucked up or whatever you're going to do?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Already planned. Those are the only ones that are removed.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've grilled you sufficiently. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Baxter.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this issue? You're welcome. Anyone is welcome to speak on this issue one way or the other. You have to come to the podium. Sorry.
Hi.
There you go.
I'm just here to observe mostly for a school project.
Great.
But I am a landowner too, and we have a lot of trees. And my husband works for CAL FIRE, so I know all about fires and all that kind of stuff. I think my question is, he went ahead and did this with knowing or not knowing what he had done, and I don't fault him for what he did. He did what he did because he felt it was right at the time. But how does that stop someone else from doing the same thing and coming to you with the same questions and saying, hey, I really wanted to move, my outhouse over here, but that tree was in the way, and, it might cause a fire, so I just went ahead and did it. So can you just, let me do this? Kind of my observation of the whole thing. You guys do what you want to do, but that was kind of how I felt, because I could see people coming and saying, well, he did it, and I'll plant a tree over here, but I don't really care if I do or not. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Anybody else want to address this issue? All right, seeing that, I'm going to bring it back to the commission for discussion and possible action. I do have a question for staff. So what are the implications then if we were to not recommend approval to council? Because we're only making a recommendation to council, But what if we didn't? So what are the implications for the property owner in that circumstance? Are they still going to be able to build what they want? I mean, there's no fine, there's no penalty.
Well, I think we're asking you to make a recommendation, either as laid out in the staff report, or your own opinion and recommendation to City Council.
But we're being recommended to certify the map amendment. Okay, with category exemption SEQA. Actually, based upon the director's comment, I might ask about that. He said it's a SEQA violation, if I heard correctly. So you understand my...
I do, but I think our request of you tonight could certainly be determined on your own merits. You can decide what your recommendation as a group is going to be to City Council, and we will forward that recommendation, whatever it is, for the council to make its final determination on this request. Did you have anything further, Chair?
Well, it's certainly true that there are changes in circumstances that make the size and or location of the building envelope as shown on the recorded map no longer appropriate or necessary. That's a statement of fact. The trees are down. So, but that doesn't deal with the issue of how the trees were down and why do we have the envelopes in the first place. So what is the value of the envelope? I'm really struggling with, okay, well, what's the big deal here?
I think if I could interject a comment, I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're kind of, we're already getting to the findings, and I had a suggestion for those. I'd rather have a fuller discussion of the application before we get to that. But this is going to, go to the City Council for, if we approve that to consideration, for them to consider changing the map. We could say, well, the trees are down, but keep the restriction, the building envelope exactly the same, and make the property owner work within that envelope as was always part of the restriction on the parcel. So they just have to find a way to fit, whatever feature it is of the house within the original building envelope. So that's one possibility.
Are you suggesting they have to now build a house as if the trees were there?
That's one possibility. I'm not suggesting that at all.
Okay, all right.
That's you seem very, we're discussing this, what are our possibilities? That is one thing, is just to say, no, just keep it exactly the way it was. Maybe something will grow up in those spaces. I don't think that that's very useful at this point.
What could have been done to have avoided this situation? And again, I'm going back to staff making the observation that had the owner come to them and said, I'd like to cut these trees down and replace them, that would have been okay.
No,
Right.
I don't think that would have been okay, because you have
I thought I heard staff say that would have been okay. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That staff would have been probably agreeable to that approach, and it's simply because the trees came down before, and then the applicant, it happened.
But regardless of what staff, would have negotiated with the property owner, this map exists as drawn. This is the subdivision map. So if they build over, say they put a driveway here on this, what was a protected area, I guess that would be maybe considered an easement. Regardless, this map would have, if that's where they want to put the driveway, and I'm not referring to the plan that you have in mind, but that still would have required changing this map under the Subdivision Map Act, as I understand the way the law works. This exists, and if the house goes here on what was formerly protected, you still have to go in front of City Council to get permission to redraw a parcel map and go through the filing with the county. That's the way I understand the way the law works.
If staff could comment,
Please.
just to clarify. Basically, what's before you is the property owner is requesting an amendment to a recorded map. And so we've come before you with a request to variance application, say to reduce a front yard setback or a side yard setback.
Yes.
Now those setbacks are in the zoning code.
Correct.
So you could think of this sort of analogous to a setback, only it's recorded on the map, so it's a higher level process, an application process in order to achieve a change to that, because it's recorded for all to see. Somebody buys this property, they know that they can only develop within that development envelope. They're not extremely common, but they're used widely, and typically in cases like this, where at the time the subdivision came through, there was a big concern about preservation of the forest. The city does have a woodland conservation ordinance as well, and I'm trying to think of the timing of when that ordinance was in place versus when this map came through, but if they coincided, then I'm sure that was an analysis that was performed when the map was being processed by the city. So with that said, staff was not trying to be punitive on the applicant. We treated this as though, where would we be before you? What would staff be recommending to the Planning Commission had those trees not come down? Well, staff agreed with the applicant that it seemed to be a better, more logical place to put the house and the driveway to reduce grading, reduce impacts on the property overall, as long as the applicant mitigated the loss of those trees. And so that's why we just had a 1-to-1 ratio where the applicant would plant those trees, ensure their survival and establishment within a 5-year period of time. So nothing would have changed as far as a recommendation had those trees still be there. You would still be saying you'd amend the building envelope, then the applicant would have been able to take the trees out because the trees would have been inside the envelope.
So the finding, I can draw some measure of comfort with findings that go along the line of this is a superior approach in terms of environmental disturbance, and even I think a legitimate argument can be made on the fire safety component. I don't think that's outside of the realm of reason. I don't see those kinds of findings listed in the map amendment findings. Are they not applicable or eligible or relevant to a map amendment findings in this case? Because to me, I could go with that. That at least gives me some protection for future decisions, which is really where I'm at with this.
Well, staff wasn't going there because the trees were in the front yard, and I think when you look at what you're doing is fuel management. I mean, you can argue that you're going to have a 300-foot setback around a house and eliminate all fuel. A lot of people do that.
Right, sure.
But I think that's not conforming to what was...
Right, so, but, okay, let me
But they can modify the fuels by limbing up and all the other things by separating vegetation so you don't have the ladder fuels.
If I added a finding then, as part of them, if I added a finding that the approach the applicant is taking, would be able to take with a map amendment, would be superior in terms of less environmental disturbance, and would that be an inappropriate finding to add? That's my direct question.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that the commission is certainly has the ability to make the findings that it feels are appropriate and necessary.
Warrant the decision.
Warrant
to
the decision you're going to
okay.
make.
All right. That's all I needed to hear. So
Well, before you go further with that, that's absolutely something I cannot agree to with the findings. This body, we don't have the evidence in front of us that this actually did reduce any of the fire danger on that lot. The ponderosa pines were at the front, close to the pavement. I think we've recognized that the fire danger comes from the north and west up the canyon, where no vegetation was removed. To my eye, looking at the lot and what has happened out there, the fuel load was reduced somewhat, but that's only in the event that there was some sort of catastrophic crown fire. As far as reducing wildfire risk, I don't think that they've done much at all for that. The trees were clustered in certain areas and they were close to the pavement. So as far as making a statement, making a finding that this has improved the fire safety of that lot, I could not agree to that.
What about the argument about it's a superior, it allows for a superior
And
building site?
I don't agree with that either. I think, there's a lot of creative ways that you could work within that building envelope, but that's not, that's not what's really before us. That's not the existence, the condition of the lot as we speak tonight. I think before the trees have been cut down, there could have been, some sort of a better analysis. And honestly, what I would like to change about the findings has nothing to do with habitat, aesthetics, fire safety. I really think that we don't have anything in our packet that says one way or the other about the fire safety. And what I would like to discuss is these findings on page 4. According to our zoning code, and that's actually, I should go back here. We're doing this under the authority of the zoning code. Where does that come? Section 10822, 10823 of our city code, and then that's goes in concert with the Subdivision Map Act, section 66472.1. That's what the city council is going to be looking at, and what staff has asked us to do is just give an up-down vote on amending this map. My disagreeing with the map amendment findings. So that's our city code. Let me find. I pulled up the relevant sections from the Subdivision Map Act. I'm sorry I didn't have time to make copies for everyone, but I'll pass it around here if you want to take a quick look. 66469 just gives a list of A through G of what are reasons to change a map. But more importantly, I think, and this is what is referenced in the staff report, is section 66472.1. And these are broken out A through D as bullet points. They're not written that way in the MAP Act itself. And just to, it's 7:15, we could argue all night long about whether this is an improvement or not to the lot, but what I'm proposing to you now is just to cut to the chase on that. I would like to change the wording of the findings. I think in this instance, I would rather quote the government code more accurately. It's paraphrased, and I think this is very germane to our discussion. And point A is, there are changes in circumstances, and I'm going to read from the MAP Act.
Please, please.
So we're amending a map, and it is authorized by local ordinance, and the local agency finds, quote, that there are changes in circumstances that make any or all of the conditions of the map no longer appropriate or necessary, and that the modifications do not impose additional burden. That becomes point B for the other, 4 points under there. I just would like to change, I want to quote the MAP Act more specifically, because it's the changed conditions, and I don't want to say that it's the size and location of the building envelope. We simply have before us changed conditions. And I also have edited the statement. Instead of saying modifying the building envelope, I would prefer that it read, the native trees with high biological value as identified on the parcel map were removed by the owner prior to development of the parcel. This change in circumstances makes the original building envelope restriction no longer appropriate to the parcel map. I'm comfortable in doing that because I feel it's, I want to respect property owners' rights. I want them to be able to build. I don't want people to feel like, that we're handcuffing them. We're not letting them, build as they see fit. But I also feel that that gives us as the commission, and then in turn the city council, that we recognize that the change in condition was an action that was taken by the property owner. And it's not, we're not making a judgment call then that this helps create defensible space, shorter driveway, less, grading. Once you break ground, once you start grading, you've impacted the land. I realize that there are definitely degrees of impact with the grading, and this, as we've discussed, could minimize that impact. But anyway, I just want to put that out for discussion here because I think we've gone over the other salient points of the application, and I think all three of us are very uncomfortable with this setting a precedent that a person can just go out and cut trees that supposedly were preserved.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Keeney. Thank you for that, Commissioner Keeney. Commissioner Zuba, do you have any comments on this at this point?
I mean, I would echo Commissioner Keeney's comments that we have to be very mindful of the precedent here. I think one thing that is salient to this is the purpose of the envelope in the first place, and that any mitigation that we recommend ought to be consistent with the purpose of that envelope or superior to it toward that goal. Now, I don't think that means replanting the trees where they were. I mean, obviously what's done is done, and we can't undo that. But if the purpose is to preserve aesthetics, is there a mitigation that we can make, that we can add to these findings?
In this case, I think not aesthetics, but it was biological value. I think that was stated in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's some mitigation that we can add to these findings that gives superior biological value to the trees that were there, that is a note of precedent toward the future, because it shows that we are taking into consideration the reason that this envelope was here in the first place. That's,
Well put.
that's all I got.
A question for staff. If the commission were to not make the recommendation in the affirmative to city council, then what's the next step? What happens?
Staff will deliver your recommendation to the city council. So the staff's recommendation along with the planning commission's recommendation would be before the council, and then the council would be the final arbiter of the application.
Okay, the council is going to be that anyway, I think, with, whether we say it's okay or not, so it's going to go there. If the council were to decide it's not okay, just playing this out, then what is the implication for the applicant then at that point? Does that determine?
Then it means the application's denied, the envelope stays as it is, and staff would then record a notice of noncompliance on the parcel to require that whether the current owner or a subsequent owner then would have to mitigate the loss of those trees on the site.
Does that, but in terms of where he wants to build the house now, does it have any bearing on that? Or there's not?
He has to build the house within the envelope as it is now
If it's
shown on the
denied,
map.
yeah.
If it's denied.
Okay.
Are
So-
you asking whether the trees that we're mitigating for, should he not move forward or get turned down by the council?
Yeah, so
That they have to go back where they were?
Let's say he draws no's all across the board. Okay, now he has a non-conforming parcel, right? Boom. But he wants to build his house closer to the street now. That's the plan, if I understand this correctly, right? He wants to build a house close to the street. Is he going to be able to do that? He says, I'm going to build a house close to the street, and then I'm going to plant 5 beautiful black oaks or something in the back there.
I'm confused as to your question. Under what scenario would that happen?
I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
how the property owner might be restricted. Will they be restricted in where they can build their house should they get no's all the way through this process? That's what I'm unclear.
As Director Ribas mentioned, the envelope would stay the same. So he would be required, should he move forward with a construction of a home, it would have to be within the currently recorded building envelope.
And
He
if
is proposing to modify that envelope, and
Right,
that's what's
okay.
before you
all right, and
tonight.
he would not be able to get a building permit to build it outside. So
That's
So
correct.
in order to build the house where he wants, he needs the amendment to the envelope, even though the trees are gone.
That's correct.
Okay, now thank you. I have clarity on this. Now I understand what the risk, consequences, and everything is. All right. Okay. I think I understand where you're at, and I share in general agreement with both of you, at least at some level. Are either one of you in a frame to possibly make a motion, or do we need to talk about the mitigation? Should we talk quickly about what we feel would be adequate mitigation measures? Should we be able to bring ourselves to approve, make a positive recommendation?
I think it's worth noting that in the case that the envelope remains as it is today, and the only other choice for building on this property seems to be extensive grading, which I think we can all agree is further detrimental to the environmental aspects of the park.
It's less desirable.
It's less desirable.
I think that's
sure. So sort of a rock in a hard place, because the trees are down and it is what it is. But the other option seems to be trees are down and we have to bring in the bulldozers to grade it. So
There's going to be, grading regardless, or, you could have a smaller house. There's a lot of other options that when you're suddenly, doing that, a lot of other things come into play that really don't affect the change map. It would be the same parcel map.
to that end, I think that part of our findings ought to be that the recommendation that we make to City Council is not only either consistent with the original purpose of the envelope, which is to preserve the environment, or that the situation as it is on the ground now to remain toward the spirit of that envelope, grading seems to be less desirable in that case.
And I'd like to point out that we allow in many, many projects, we allow the establishment of wetlands and other environmental things that are nowhere near where the actual property is going. They're able to buy that kind of balance, as it were. So, on the one hand, I don't want to get too wrapped around the axle over that. I think my comfort level would be with some restoration measures on this parcel to allow the applicant to put the house where they want, and then let's replace some trees. I think an argument can be made for a superior species of tree, like some native oak trees. I wouldn't go with live oak, I don't think, but some other native oak trees might be a much better replacement, and I think I could live with that. And I think that meets the intent of preserving the biological value. I don't know if it was diversity, but we could throw diversity in there if that works. But it would retain, it would replace the biological value we had with different biological value, and I think I could live with that. Okay, I do not want to see. I don't want to set this up for a failure. I'm unhappy as how it evolved. However, I think that just a minor change in sequence, we would be in a completely different place than we are right now. So, I'm going to look to you, Commissioner Keeney, though, with I appreciate the detail with which you went in to the code. Frankly, if maybe you might be able to pull some of that in the construction of a motion, if you are of a like mind to possibly move this forward with a positive recommendation to City Council.
Certainly, I just would like to, could we hammer out, or do you want to send back to staff based on their knowledge of our woodland ordinances? We don't have a tree protection guideline. As far as changing the species of trees, I'm okay with the ponderosa pine trees, but that seems to be a sticking point for the applicant and my other commissioners. Are there other tree species that you would consider as part of more of a restoration effort?
Well, staff would leave that primarily up to up to the commission, but staff's recommendation on how you should fashion that should allow then staff the ability to approve a replanting plan submitted by the applicant such that the species then selected, other than ponderosa pine, would be other tree species that are found in the immediate area. Not throughout California, not throughout, El Dorado County.
Correct.
But that's, germane to that project site, to the Quartz Mountain subdivision. If it's types of oak species that are there. So that way we want to ensure the greatest success of the trees that are planted.
Okay, so we need to recraft or rewrite point 4 on page 5 to allow staff to work with the applicant to develop a restoration plan, a tree planting plan, and recommend tree species as found in the neighboring parcels or in the neighboring area.
Something like where it says, instead of saying to mitigate for the property owner applicant tree removal, we would say that property owner shall submit to development services a replanting plan showing species subject to approval by staff. And I would maybe further add, that would give direction to the applicant, that applicant will submit a tree replanting palette that selects species of trees that are found within the Quartz Mountain subdivision.
Much better. And that could include ponderosa pines.
Yes.
I seem to be the outlier that I don't think that they're particularly dangerous, but that's if oak trees. Actually, just from, and you've seen enough of these mitigation sites, replanting oak trees, it's probably a lot easier to get pine trees established than it would be to get oak trees, cedars.
In terms of our enjoyment of the tree, yes, because it'll take a long time for an oak tree to get up to a size that really
And
would be...
The failure rate on
Yeah.
oak plantings is really high. I think it would just be a lot easier. I don't want to burden on the property owner to, try to propagate oaks. Honestly, experts struggle with this all the time, getting oaks to grow as part of mitigation. But I appreciate your quick rephrasing of point 4 to submit to development services.
Development services.
Planting
Department.
palette of trees found.
Found within the
Within-
Quartz Mountain subdivision.
Right.
Subject to approval by
Yes.
department staff.
Excellent.
Commissioner Zuba, is this going in a direction you think you could support?
It is.
Okay.
I'm curious if my fellow commissioners share my reservations about a finding of exemption from CEQA, given what we've heard from staff.
Yeah, I would actually,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would ask staff to verify that that's an accurate statement given what's happened.
It is staff's opinion that, and again, I think staff thinks the risk of litigation from somebody who doesn't like the project is very, very slim, but I think staff is comfortable that this is that the project taken as a whole that includes the replanting of the trees is de minimis.
Okay.
I mean, we wanted to,
statement that-
not burden the applicant with going the whole 9 yards and doing an addendum to the EIR that was prepared for the project. That would have been very, very costly to the applicant, and we just don't see a risk of going that route. So that's why we found that, the project as fashioned, that does include the replacement of these trees, is full mitigation. It's just a modification of a building envelope.
And as the implications of CEQA, what we're looking at is a map amendment. We're not considering, the EIR that was
There's
written
no
for
new
Quartz
parcel,
Mountain.
no new parcels
What we're
being
looking at-
created. The use of the parcel is still the same. It's a minor alteration.
Exactly.
In terms of how
Yes.
it's going to be used. So I do believe it conforms pretty tightly then, and I would concur with staff on that.
All right, thank you for the clarification and understanding that the way that we are considering this project is not, any CEQA problems that may have come up is not within the scope of what we are considering here. Okay, so that assuages my fears.
I think that's fair. Okay. All right.
And how do you gentlemen feel about amending Roman numeral 2 to ask staff to just quote section 66472.1 as written in the
For 2A,
government
for 2A
code?
and B?
Well, actually, 2A, B, C, and D.
Oh.
Just, I would ask that you just state it as found in the government
actual
code, in the actual
code
government
language.
code. Rather, I think the only one you paraphrased was the first one, A, where you mentioned building envelope. That's just not in the law. So I would just be more comfortable with that. And then, as far as substantiating point A, I would prefer the language that I proposed earlier. Are you
I'm comfortable with the language you
comfortable with that?
proposed earlier.
Great. Just wanted to make sure that I understood that we were all on the same page about that.
Will that work for staff? Do you think you can make that work?
I guess I'm unclear as to the last statement by Member Keeney. What section were you referring to?
I'll provide you my printouts. It's just
you talking
from
about?
Ledge info that I printed out, government code, section 66472.1, which is, as you stated in the staff report, that's what we're bound by under our zoning ordinance, our codes and ordinance. But I just would prefer that we quote it directly. Rather than,
That's understood, but you said something subsequent to that I didn't understand. Related to
change
some
the
sort of comment
supporting,
earlier.
change
Yeah.
the supporting paragraph below point A to read what I read previous, and I'll provide you with my.
Okay, thank you.
I'll give you that also.
Do you want it read as part of the motion or no? Can you read it as
I
part
could,
of
yes, as part
Yeah, it
of
can
Yeah,
certainly
please.
be read as part of the motion, and she can give you what she
Absolutely.
wrote.
of the native trees with high biological
When
value.
you're ready to make the motion.
Oh,
yeah.
he's
Yeah,
not
when-
taking the notes right now. Okay.
Yeah, when you're ready to make the motion.
So
you
I would like to make the motion that we approve the staff report and the findings therein. One, that it is categorically exempt from CEQA. Two, the map amendment findings as I propose to modify them. Also, the conditions of approval with the change to condition number 4, as we discussed with Mr. Rivas, that this will be more of a planting plan submitted to Development Services using a palette of trees found in the Quartz Mountain subdivision. So with those changes to the staff report, then recommend to City Council to approve the change to the parcel map as proposed.
Okay, so you're including the recommendation as part of the motion.
Yes, recommendation 1 and 2. Yes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. First, I'll ask if staff is clear on the motion.
Yes, we are.
Terrific. Any additional discussion on the motion by commissioners?
Chair, staff, I have one last comment, if I
Yes.
may. And this is only because there was so much discussion about property rights, and so
Yes.
I feel that maybe to give just a different perspective on that. Keep in mind that there was a property owner of the entire property that became the Quartz Mountain subdivision. That subdivider was afforded the right to subdivide in accordance to the regulations, the conditions of approval for the map, and it became recorded as such. So that allowed then for, and maybe Mr. Painter knows how many lots there are within the Quartz Mountain subdivision, but X number of lots that people can buy are subject and bound by the zoning and the conditions of that map. There's no denial of property rights because you bought a parcel within a subdivision where actually a previous owner was given the right to subdivide in accordance with the rules and regulations of the city. I just wanted you to keep that in perspective when the property rights are going back and forth, because Because for the most part, I think what the commission is charged to do is to ensure that the city's general plan and zoning code and regulations, such as maintaining that the conditions are met in our subdivisions are adhered to. There's a whole process for amending it. We went through that amendment process. And so it's not necessary to make sure that the property owner gets to do whatever he wants on a piece of property. Thank you.
Fair enough. Any additional comments or discussion on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Chair Friend.
Aye.
Vice Chair Keeney.
Aye.
Member Juba.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. Mr. Baxter, I want to thank you in an odd sort of way for bringing such a challenging problem to us this evening. I wish you good luck in your endeavor, and any idea about how long before council will take this up?
Well, it's difficult to provide you that. We are required to publicly notice that meeting, and that notice, of course, cannot be done because your action needs to be referenced in that notification. It's required by a court case that requires local governments to mention. This is just esoteric for you, but there is a requirement of the city and counties throughout the state that when an action is recommended to move forward, the recommendation needs to be a part of the notification process.
Okay.
In the past, we have, I do remember this when we first, if it's informational only, we used to publish notices concurrently at the same time for different dates for the council and the planning commission. And that ran afoul because other governments were doing it too. Somebody challenged it because they weren't notified that I wasn't told what I couldn't attend the planning commission meeting. What did they do? I don't know. I got this other notice, and so anyway, it was challenged in some other jurisdiction, and here we are. So I can't give you a definitive answer. It might be 3 or more weeks from now. I think might be the
Do you think
earliest,
before
yeah.
Christmas?
I think that's possible.
All right. So that's our ballpark at the moment, Mr. Baxter.
Best case scenario, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
If the Planning Commission approves the minutes on November the 6th, maybe depending upon how far we get along in our noticing, then it would be considered by the City Council at their
this
November the 27th
commissioner will be gone
meeting.
on November 6th.
That's problematic. That could be problematic. But thank you for telling me.
Yes.
We have a public notice that's gone out for that date.
Okay.
And as you are aware, we are one commissioner short.
And then there were 4.
And then the fourth one who isn't here tonight, I understand that he's given me advanced indication that he may miss another meeting because of the circumstance that he is in, without going into details.
Sure.
So if we have 3, if you can confirm with us in the next couple of days,
I can
that
tell
would
you,
be
I can
fantastic.
give you my flight to
Okay.
New Zealand.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I leave that day. I leave that day.
Thank you.
Don't you know the flights are cheaper on Wednesdays?
Can't we? We can't Skype it, I bet. So I'm sorry about that. So, Mr. Baxter, we're not sure exactly how soon, and we only have 3 members this evening. So I mean, it's a number of things, but you've come this far. All right. Moving on our agenda then. That brings us then to item 5.1, matters from commissioners. So first of all, I'll advise council or staff that I will not be here. Thank you, sir. I will not be here on November 6th. I will miss, if there are 2 meetings, and I may miss both. Actually, what's 6, 13, 20? Right? Is that correct?
That's right.
I would be missing, so I will miss the 2 meetings in November. Vice
Just
Chair.
came from New Zealand.
You did? Just came?
Yeah, that's how I missed the last meeting. I only missed one meeting on my vacation. I did leave some in New Zealand for you to
Wahiki?
enjoy.
Oh, thank you. Did you go to Wahiki? No? South Island, North Island, both islands?
North Island.
North
I was,
Island.
at the Great Barrier Reef.
Oh, yes.
Short-
Commissioner Zuba.
Should we read anything into the fact that you're fleeing the country on Election Day?
Okay, enough.
I won't be tracking results. I'm gonna enjoy my vacation. I'm not even gonna No, I'll be incommunicado. All right. Any other items of commissioners for staff?
I just, I'm glad that this came before us. I think it points out we all struggled with this tree removal. You know, mitigation measures can be much more strict, onerous even, inch for inch, you know, ratios of replacement plantings for removing trees. And I think as a member of the audience pointed out, I move forward with this. Reasons are that, you know, I feel like we need to promote a little bit of development. You know, housing for citizens, and that Quartz Mountain subdivision in particular is kind of looking lonely up there. So if someone does want to build, and I think it's important to show a little movement in that. But I do, the precedent. We have set a precedent, but we did require, you know, some mitigation, and perhaps is something we can discuss further, how we can bolster our zoning, our requirements, so that if this does happen again, we're not really at a loss. We're more confident in what we require to try to restore and make up for the fact that we lost something of value.
Okay. Thank you. Staff.
Yeah, a couple items. The commission is probably aware that the city council considered the appeal of the competition K-9 project on Green Valley Road. And the council did agree with the planning commission's approval of the project, so they denied the appeal. They did massage a few of the conditions, but overall, it's basically the project that you entitled. They did add some language, and Pierre was at the hearing, but involves requiring over a period of time, I think it's 6 to 8 months, where they have to come back to staff, where we analyze the additional hour that was granted for the outdoor use of the back part of the facility. And then there was some language about the noise, or excuse me, the smell component, the odor from dog waste, for lack of a better.
Right.
But that's what happened a week ago. Also, as you're probably aware of, the recruitment for member Saragosa's chair is now open, and the city clerk is receiving and accepting applications. The cutoff time is Friday, November the 9th. So if you or anyone in the audience who meet the qualifications can certainly submit an application. And the application is submitted to the city clerk on the 4th floor of City Hall. Nothing from the chair? Okay, nothing from the...
All right. Seeing no other business before us, I'll move for adjournment.
Second?
Thank you. So adjourned.